hockey friends and families around the world, welcome to yet another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, as always, joined by Christy Casciano-Burns and Mike Benelli. And today's topic is one that's not talked about often on podcasts or shows, and it's the Player of the Game Award. Now, before you turn off or tune off or whatever you're doing, we're not talking about the award that goes out on the ice sometimes after a game. We're talking about the in-locker room player or coach-chosen Player of the Game Award, something that has become really a little bit infamous over the last maybe decade after we've seen it on TV with NHL teams. But we want to go into it today and not just talking about our great stories that we have involving these Player of the Game Awards, but why they're important, examples of them, and then most importantly at the end, how to create them effectively for your team. Because it's not as simple as just throw something in there and award it. This is actually a tactic that we use in team bonding all the time to make it work for others. So again, we're talking about something inside of the locker room. This typically takes place at the end of a game when a team wins. Sometimes you do it when a team loses as well, where a player will select the next player in line to receive a Player of the Game award based on work ethic or different standards that a team will have. We'll talk about that later. I want to start the show by talking about the locker room in general, because locker rooms tend to change depending on the level you're at, depending on the team you're at, depending on how much money you have. You might be in locker room 3 in a rink, or you may be in your own, branded locker room with stalls and everything. It doesn't matter what type of locker room you're in my opinion, as a coach, as a former player, the locker room is a sacred place. All right. You've all heard the saying, what's said in the room stays in the room. I'm a big believer in that, unless it's something harmful, obviously. I'm also a big believer that that's a place for the team to be together without parents, without outside fans, without any distractions. It's one of the few places that is still left alone when you think about it in any sport, right? So it's a sacred place to me. All right. I'm also a big believer that really from the NHL down, if you're a parent out there or you're a family member, right, you have to always remember you don't see 100% what's going on, even a coach's life, with every kid all the time, right? We always say this. You see the games, you see the practices, you see what's on the ice. You don't typically see what's going on in the locker room. You don't typically get to see those conversations between players to players, players to coaches, back and forth, however you want to look at it. So this is an important part of the puzzle to making a team work, right? Now, when we go into a unification object, that's my technical, if we had scientific names for things, the Player of the Award I call that a unification object, because it's something the whole team buys into that is given out after every game. It should be a great source of pride for your team. It should be a great award. Again, if you're winning or losing, that if you're given that, it should mean something. And it also helps teams find a why we're playing, right? I always say this, and I'm going to throw this right to Mike after this. I always say this, that, when I work with teams, I ask them, well, what do you want to do? When I walk in for team building, well, we want to win, coach. Everybody wants to win. Why do you want to win? Why should you win? This unification piece becomes a major part in understanding that why. It's also a week to week, or sometimes every few days, reminder of that why. Now, Mike, you've been in locker rooms your whole life. You're a coach. Is this something that you implement with your teams, or what are your general thoughts on just the unification object to begin with?
Yeah, so I try to do something with our teams every year, in every season, even in the spring seasons, and even in a training camp type of situation, because I think it really does. It does unify the team, gives them a common goal and a bond. Keeps them focused on the mission at hand.
Right.
And I think it also gives you the opportunity, depending on how you use it and kind of what the criteria you set forward with it. Gives you the opportunity to manipulate the experience in the room too, because depending on how you classify this award, if you're going to say, oh, it goes to the award to the kid that scores the most goals in every game, okay, well, you're kind of limiting yourself,
right,
from having the opportunity to do anything with that award and teach
and
anything.
sending the wrong message too.
Yeah, well, right, but I mean, it's just like one of those things where like, okay, well, you probably don't want to have, like me, I probably wouldn't say, okay, whoever has the most hits in a game wins it automatically. Like, so
Right.
have the ability to say, well, the award is for, this is why we have this recognition, and these are the ways you're going to earn it, and this is what it means. And I think then you could start picking kids that normally, maybe not get in the mix,
right,
on these opportunities. So, I look at it, but I think it's really important to have, some type of unification, and common goal for the kids. And I
right.
love it being an object. I like it being
Something
something that's
tangible.
tangible.
Right.
Right. And they can take with them whether you're in a locker room where your own locker room where it stays there and the kids remember it, or it's like the old, elementary school where you bring it home and,
Right.
don't lose it, don't break it, don't let the
Right.
dog eat
Right.
it. And you take care of that until the next time,
Well,
we
it,
need it again.
it becomes a responsibility at that point, which is another great life lesson. Christy, I'm
Yeah.
sure that your kids have dealt with this. I'm sure your daughter, who plays in college, still has things like this. What are your thoughts on the unification object or the player of the game or whatever we want to call it here?
Right. Well, let's talk about the locker room first. And you're absolutely right. It's a sacred place. If you think about it, it's a giant melting pot. It's where the
Right.
kids really begin the game before they step on the ice. And that's where you end the game too. And there's a lot of trash talking, obviously, that goes on. There's some, talk amongst themselves. But when they come into that locker room, it's really important that they feel that unification. Everybody's the same, even though you come from different backgrounds or different parts of town. You're all together. It's a giant melting pot. So it's really important to establish that sacredness, that so as soon as the kids walk into that locker room, they need to respect each other and respect the team. And one way that my daughter's team does that is prominently placed in the locker room is a purple knight, a logo, big circle. I think it's carpeted now, but you can't step on that.
Right.
You
Right.
have to show complete respect. And if you step on it, Lord help the woman who steps on that
Right.
logo, right? But again, it creates that atmosphere of how important it is that you all come together, respect each other, respect the team, and when you step out on the ice, hopefully carry out that as well. Um, and yeah, so even at the college level, there's that whole notion of unity and being a team and a giant melting pot in the locker room. So that environment is really important to create.
Right. And I'll say this, that it actually expands the higher you get, the higher levels. At the NHL level, this is incredibly important. It is not something that's overlooked. It's funny you bring up the logo on the floor. That's been a very prominent thing in locker rooms, at least every locker room I've been in for at least the last 15 years. To the point that, and this is funny, not everybody can do this, but I know several NHL teams have removed the logo from the floor and put it on the ceiling in a big,
Oh,
grand, almost chandelier level object at the top of the ceiling, just because they wanted to free up the floor space because
so it
so
wasn't
many
like a
teams,
temple.
right, every team was like, we're losing 30% of our floor space, so they moved the logo off the ground and put it up so that you see it
Clever.
above all the time.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I just literally had that experience recently where we had a logo, like again, the logo on the floor. Great, I love that. Let's bond behind something,
Right.
but we're in a 12 by 12 room.
Right.
So and the
Right.
logo was 10 by 10. So every kid was getting yelled at, and every person was
Right.
stepping on the thing. You could not go there and not step on it. So I think that's really important that when you're going to have these you know pieces of pride,
Right.
either hang them somewhere, put them somewhere, make them so it's not causing anxiety.
Right.
I mean, the locker room is
Yeah.
a sacred place, but I mean, I know we had one team parent that used to make the locker rooms magnet signs. So any locker room we went into, because youth hockey, you're never in your own locker room,
Right.
basically. So, but you would get there for a game, and it felt like you were in your own locker room. She had the kids' names, you hung up, in the
Wow.
and she would collect them after every game, put them
Right.
back up, and then you'd walk in any locker room, home and away. The logo would be on the door, and the kids felt like they were in their own locker room all the time. And
I
it took
love
what
that.
it
That
took,
is such a great
it
idea.
took
We
it
all
took
need to
15
adopt
minutes.
that.
Yeah, like it took like 15 minutes at Staples or so. Well, I shouldn't say how long it took her. I could, she did a great job of putting, laminating it, putting together. But to Lee's point, your point, Christy, it was such a sense of pride
Right.
for those kids because they felt like, they were the Washington Capitals. They're like, hey, I'm going into my own locker room, and here's my
Mike,
name tag. And
I-
and
A great
as the
idea.
coach, I could make sure I had kids sitting where I want them to sit too in that locker room because I could put their name tags where I wanted certain kids to sit at certain times.
Mike, I'll tell you this too, that in my experience as a team builder, which again, for those of you listening or watching, this is what I do for a living. This is so not limited to just hockey, right? When I work with businesses or teams or anything in between, I always say, your ability to brand something as simple as a document, right? With your logo saying this is part of what we do goes a lot further than people think it does, right? I'll bring it back to sports. When I played for teams and I do this with all my teams, but when I played with a team, if I was handed a playbook at the beginning of the year, and obviously as you move up the ranks, you get these more and more, the presentation of that playbook said a lot about the team. If it was just thrown together and it was pages and, here's some information, don't get me wrong, I always appreciate the effort. That's one thing. But if it had my team logo on every page and it had an organization technique to it, it was like, this is the standard that this team is, man, it raised my level up. Like, I better study this stuff. Our logo's all over this. Like you said, walking into a locker room. Yeah, if you walk into a locker room and it's just that typical, like you said, 12 by 12 with the concrete bricks, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you can enhance it and say, this is our locker room right now, right? We own this space. This is our sacred space. It goes a lot further. I know there's going to be people listening, be like, yeah, what? It goes way further than you think it does in the minds of these kids. They all want to be pros, right? Treat them like this. I remember I was playing for the Little Flyers growing up. I have no shame in saying this. I remember in the warmups looking at my reflection whenever I could because I was wearing the Flyers jersey and I just was blown away. I remember when we would play like the junior Penguins, we always had a little bit of a higher mentality for that game because we were playing the Penguins and we were the Flyers. We were playing Little Capitals. If we were playing it like the Lasers, which was a team back then, don't get me wrong, it was a game, but it wasn't the same as playing the Penguins. Like these things matter, right? And you can get these into the minds of your kids early to set standards. I'm going to bring this back to the conversation. I love that we're expanding this to more than just the object, but your ability to have pride in what you're doing goes a long way. Now, Christy, I want to talk about your point for a minute because you made me think of something when you were talking, and you both can answer this. I'll throw this question out there. How often in your life, are you in an enclosed space with 20 other people or 15 or whatever? How often in your life are you really in a situation where you're with 15 other people in an enclosed space and you're having to figure things out? If you think about that, it's not often, right? If you play sports, it's more often than not, right? And, we're in an office, but that's not the same thing as being in an office, right? Now, think about the NHL players when they talk about, and I always like to bring this back to the pros because it's a good standard to set. When they tell you about their careers, they might tell you about the cup they won or the great moments, but they'll talk about the locker room. They're going to talk about the group, the team, and spending time in that locker room. Maybe we don't spend enough time together in that locker room as teams, as human beings, and maybe we don't take it seriously enough about being part of a team. I think when you look at, I'm not trying to digress here, but when you look at society as a whole, we're just massively lacking the ability to work together, right? So if we really want to fix that, unfortunately, it's not going to really start with the adults in the room. It's going to start by raising children that understand how to work with each other, right? The next generation is the one that's going to have to deal with that. And you can start with that with your kids. So again, bringing that back, I do want to get into some stories here. And again, we're going to go through some examples of locker room objects or anchors, as I called them earlier. And at the end of the show, we are going to go over some major tactics on how to implement them. So make sure you're staying tuned to listen to that. All right, because that's really the key to the whole thing working. And yes, I'm totally fishing rod out there making you stay for the whole episode, but that's the whole point. I'd be a bad host to do that. Hopefully you're smiling. Mike's smiling, Christy's smiling. I did my job. Okay.
Love it.
So the first
It's a
one.
great tease.
Right. Thank you. Stay on tune. No. Okay. One of them I want to talk about is this kettlebell I use. So I was coaching a team over in Europe. And I did a lot of stuff at training camp, which I'm going to get into later in the show. But one of the things I had them do was they had to carry this kettlebell around as a team, whatever we did the entire weekend, right? So for 3 days, I gave the kettlebell to the captain first. And I said, someone has to have this in their hand the entire time, no matter what we're doing, running, classroom, going up a hill, someone has to have it. And I told them, I suggest you pass it around, not one person. So the whole training camp, they passed this around. And at the end of the training camp, I said, this is now our unification object. That's going to go to the winner or whatever standard we set for a player of the game. That player is going to get this kettlebell. And I loved it because they really had pride in that kettlebell throughout the season. Obviously, they had earned it. It stood for something that they did that nobody else had done. And that became a big source of pride for any player that got it. And the cool part about this story is we won a championship that year. At the end of the year, I had all the players sign it. And I actually have that kettlebell in my house. Right. So that's my trophy. I always joke that was my trophy because it represented the team as a whole. That's one story. That's one that's a little bit start to finish. Another great one is, if you listen to the show, I have great respect for our military. And one of the things I was able to do one time is I was speaking to a war veteran, and he still had his helmet. He had his war helmet, and he donated it to a team I was coaching and said, "Can you use this as your player of the game award?" And he came in the locker room before the season and explained combat. I'm not going to go obviously into that. It was a private moment, but he explained the combat he had been through and what he had seen and what he had done with it, with his brothers and sisters. And he donated that helmet that he had brought to war to the team. Now, you talk about setting standards, right? Winning that, I shouldn't even say winning, earning that helmet at the end of the game really meant something to that team, right? Because it stood for something completely larger than themselves, right? That's another great concept that these stand for. I always say when I work with teams, there's a team before me, there's a team after me. I'm on the team right now. It is so important to establish that with your groups that you are not bigger than the team. The team is bigger than you. There's a past, there's a future. You're the present. How do you fit into that timeline? How do you fit into that family tree of everyone that's come before and that will come after? Are you living up to that standard? So those are just two quick examples that I've had. I'd love to throw it out to you two to see if you've had any specific examples. And again, there's so many stories I could see on TV. We'll talk about some of those too. But Mike, I'm going to toss the hockey puck to you. We'll get you a little sauce action. Have you seen any of these? You have a favorite story or unification object that you've seen?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important pieces of this unification object and this team, building tool is that you don't try to, develop it in the wrong context. Like, don't just do it because somebody else said, "Hey, you know what? We've had," you see like every squirt team in the U.S. has a hard hat award,
Right?
Every kid has a hard hat helmet, or I think one of the overriding themes around it is to the reason you're having it is because you want it to tell a story that is lasting throughout the season and the kids can unify around it. Right. So, finding a way to make it personal and getting your kids involved to say, okay, guys, these are our values. This is our mission. This is what we want to do. What can we do? Now, a lot of schools, if you're in a high school or college, it might be part of the school, it might be the school. Like, I know we've used like at Plymouth State, we use the panther, or
right. There's nothing wrong with that.
Accent of it. Yeah, I think it all depends on the situation you're in. But if you're in a youth program with kids, number one is you want to make it, like I've seen, team jackets, or the kids getting, the Broadway hat, or you see these, and people can replicate what the NHL does. Just the Washington Capitals doing the dojo and
the Cobra Kai and the Miyagi-Do.
What I loved about that is they had an offensive award and a defensive award every game. Right. So this is our offensive player, this is our defensive player, and really try to build them around. But that came about not off a whim. There was a story behind it. There's a mission attached to it, and there's the reason why they're giving it. And then the kids can, the players and can earn that based off it. So I think there's so many. I mean, for every team I've coached and every program I've been associated with, it's always been a different model of what they're doing. I don't think I've been where it's the same one. And even one was like a piece of paper. It was like some kind of a poem or something. And then the kids would have that in their locker and hang it in their locker because we were in a high school program. And then it would go somewhere else. And there was something where if a parent walked in, and they say, "Oh, why is, oh, well, your son earned this, like the last weekend series, they did this. They don't tell you about, they didn't tell you about that." Like, no. And that goes back to, well, it's in the locker room. It's what we do with our team. It's our pride.
Christy, how about you? I'm sure that, again, you've seen some specific examples in your time with your kids.
Yes, good and bad. I like the construction of the hard hat. I thought that was great. That worked for our high school team. The kids really loved being recognized, not for scoring the most goals or, for being, the best goalie, but whoever was the hardest working kid got the hard hat, the construction hat. It was a real construction hat. And I could see just the excitement on the kids. And it always did seem to elevate their play a bit because everybody wanted to earn that hard hat. So I thought that was a good motivator. I also liked when they were younger, they would get little star stickers if they did something really well. And at the end of the season, you'd, see how many stars they earned, that was cool too when they were little. Something that really backfired, I'll have to share this story with you, is we also had a coach who, coach of a boys, my son's team, and he would embarrass the boys if they were selfish or didn't work hard enough or weren't meeting his expectations. He'd make them wear a pink penny during practice. And the whole idea was to shame them. Well, one boy refused to wear it, had quite a horrible reaction to it, refused to wear it. And all the parents, and it caused a lot of dissension and, turmoil on the team. So that one backfired, the shaming. So that was not a good motivator at all.
I hope it backfired. Yeah.
Sure did. That was not good.
No, shaming.
Yeah.
Look, every coach does it a little differently. There is just absolutely no research to show that tactic pays off long term.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Like 20 years ago, when Bobby Knight was the greatest coach of all time, and he had his tactics. It'd be easy to look at a Bobby Knight, the famous basketball college coach, obviously Texas Tech, and where did he coach? Mike, I can't remember. Christy.
Yeah.
I remember
Indiana,
Texas
right.
Tech. Yeah.
Yeah. Be very easy for a lot of inexperienced coaches to look at him and say, well, he's doing it right. Well, here's the truth. Bobby Knight's been fired multiple times. He was a great coach, and he absolutely had a method to his madness. It was the power of negative persuasion. You can argue the merits of that. He was very effective at that. That's the only example of a coach, I think, that I know that was very effective of that in a public way. There's no statistics to show that at a youth level that has any benefit. In fact, there's plenty of statistics, it's a fun word, to show the opposite, that it's very negative. Now, I always have to say this when I say this. I am not talking about sugarcoating things to make it happy. I am just talking about the power of negative persuasion, which is what Christy just alluded to, embarrassing kids or calling them out in a poor way. I'm a big believer of you criticize in private and you compliment in public, right? There's a right way to teach a kid to be better. Now, if a kid is being a complete ASS, then you have to handle that in your own way. But Mike, you should probably talk on this a bit too. You're a level 5 coach with USA Hockey. Obviously, you know these techniques. Again, we're not talking about sugarcoating it with kids. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but there is a way to do this and handle this that has nothing to do with shaming a kid.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to some of our earlier conversations about who the coach is and their age and if they're a parent or not a parent. Like I know, like when I was really a young coach, like right out of high school, and as a high school coach, if a kid forgot his helmet, say, he'd have to wear the yellow Cooper loaner helmet, from the back room. And that was, in hindsight, that was shaming that kid. It was like, hey, you forgot your helmet, so you got to wear this bright yellow helmet on the ice. And the kid would be like, oh, geez, I'm never going to do that again. So when you think about it, like it was, and again, it wasn't supposed to be a shaming moment. It was like, hey, you forgot your helmet, so I'm going to give you the most uncomfortable piece of equipment that we have in the building, or you're just not going to practice because I can't let you on the ice. But I think to go in and purposely say, you know what, you young man, young girl, were an embarrassment today, and we're going to actually expose that embarrassment by embarrassing you even more.
Right.
And I think, and I don't even know what realm that becomes a teaching moment. On either way, like I don't know if that teaches a lesson, if that player then says, oh, I'm never going to do this again. I think today's world too is why is he picking pink? Why doesn't he pick purple or bright red or
brown?
So brown, whatever. But there's a lot there's a lot to be said for that, right? But I think at the end of the day, in our world right now, and in the category of how can we get kids and uplift them, there is plenty of opportunity for giving criticism and pointing the negatives out to players. I think we just all have to do it in a different way,
right?
Than we've maybe done it. Like I know, like I've said this multiple times, I think on this podcast, like if I coached players now the way I was coached, or even when I started to coach at the beginning, I probably wouldn't be coached. I wouldn't have coached very long because I would if I didn't evolve, then the game would have passed me by a long time ago because those techniques just aren't effective, and nor do they make anybody feel good. I mean, how could that make that coach feel good? So, I just think it's really a fine line of saying, what are your standards? What are better ways that you can point out the fact that you're not happy with a player, and then what can you do to uplift that player? That's your job. Your job is to bring that player and uplift them, and give them an opportunity to succeed, and build, and breaking them down. I don't think in a public, JB said it even on our podcast, right? Even at the highest levels of the military, if you make that Army, if you're an Army Ranger, right, you become that Ranger. You're not the lowest man on the pole. You're part of the team. We're all equal. We all have to contribute together. So how do we do that so we're not belittling anybody?
Mike, I'll dive into the psychology really quickly for the audience. Now, I want you to hear me at home. How you respond to what I'm about to say, and I am sounding a little condescending, and I apologize, will actually tell you a lot about how you approach this topic. All right. Because the underlying psychology with this comes back to the word love. Okay. Now don't roll your eyes, because that's the truth. Okay. If you are one of those people that says, well, I got ripped apart when I was a kid and it motivated me, again, you might need to dive into your psychology a little bit and think about, how did your parents teach you? How was love conveyed in your family? Make no mistake, the aspect of the coach to player relationship heavily comes back to the word love in a loose sense, meaning the caring for somebody else, right? And we're all taught love different ways, okay? I had very, very compassionate parents that taught me what that was at a young age. They were always encouraging to me, and that's the way I was motivated, right? The kids that tended to be motivated by pain or motivated by embarrassment were also embarrassed at home. And again, I'm not going to go deep into this, but the psychology shows, the research shows that is not extremely conducive to a quality performance or life. All right. And when you look at the greatest of all time athletes, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, there are very few that are not heavily flawed. Now, they're human beings. We're all flawed. But, you think about what Tiger Woods did to his family, what Michael Jordan has done to his family. It doesn't take away their greatness in sport. And I'm sure they would tell you it was worth it, maybe. All right. But you have to take a step back and realize your kid might not be Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods, and that's okay. All right. How are you expressing love to your children, and how are they perceiving that and taking it into the world? Make no mistake, it plays a major role in team sports, and a major role into their using hockey or sports as a vehicle for their growth into human beings. Again, I'm not saying sunshine and rainbows. I'm not saying when you walk in the locker room after a loss, it's got to be all love and happiness. Love can be shown strongly as well. All right. But as Mike said, are you encouraging them? Are they learning? Is it conducive to that, or are you embarrassing them? There is statistically a right way and a wrong way to do this, right? But
and just one thing on that, Lee, because I think as a coach, right, and with a bunch of parents, and they're all watching how you're working with their children, that you don't have. I mean, I know a lot of parents are like, oh yeah, I want you to get in there and discipline the kids. They need that. I go, no, you do that at home.
Right.
That's not my job. My job for 4 hours a week is to get them to love playing for me, and love being in the rink, and love making mistakes, and knowing, hey, I can recover from this. This is not going to hurt me for the rest of my career. And I think we're building, and there's so few of us that are building the Michael Jordans and the Tiger Woods of the world. We're it's said over and over.
Usually
and
born
over again.
with it
building,
too.
But we're building human beings. We just had these conversations every time, right? That so what can we do in the context of like a team award and the ability to bring your team together? What can we do in that locker room that uplifts all of them?
Everyone.
Like the greatest part I love about these team awards, and when the whole team's behind the kid that gets it.
Right.
Like, it's not like, oh God, I didn't get it again. Like you got to figure out a way. That's the way you motivate a kid.
And
like,
you'll even see kids try to help that kid get that award. Instead of putting them down, they're lifting them up.
Right. How many times you've seen, Christy, right, towards the end of the season with your own kids, where the kid didn't get that goal, or the kid never got an award, and all the kids that always got the awards, like even me, like I did that one aspect I used to give in high school. We would give the kids helmet stickers. So it almost looked like the Ohio State, where you see the kids with all the stickers, because that's 4 years of them earning something every day. But you can strategically, as a coach, make sure that one kid doesn't have, every aspect of their helmet covered, and the other kid has nothing. You got to find a way to say, well, you earned it because this is what you did. Yes, you didn't score the most goals. You didn't have the biggest hit. You didn't make the greatest play on defense, but you did something that contributed to the team winning. And I think you can, as a coach, to me, that was a way that kid felt like I seen it. He's showing the helmet to his dad, and look what I earned today. And he's like, "You didn't do anything." I'm like, "No, but I did. I did something for my team." And
here's another story I want to share with you. I talked about how a coach embarrassed a kid. Now here's another example of a coach embarrassing himself as a motivator for the kids. So he challenged my daughter's team. This was a great coach. He was lots of fun, always looking for fun opportunities. So he challenged the girls, hey, if you score X amount of goals, X amount of passes, do this play, I will go out on the ice in a clown referee suit and do an entire team practice. And it's a hilarious suit. He showed him a picture of it. I will wear this if you girls do that. They did, and he did. We all got our cameras out and videotaped it, and the girls just had the best time. And it was just one of those fun motivators. So there are ways that coaches can also put a challenge out there to the kids. It doesn't have to be an object.
I think that's
you can kind of turn the tables, and then you become the motivating factor yourself as a coach.
I think
that's a fun way to bond the kids too.
I think that, that communal bonding towards a common purpose, like Herb Brooks did that with the 1980 team, albeit he made them kind of hate him, but it's the same idea, right? Is that like we're doing this together. And I love the positive of putting a coach in a clown outfit. I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with that.
Or, kiss a pig or whatever.
I've had some coaches that they would make, they'd wear figure skates. And that's not to be, derivative of anybody. It's just like, that was the funny thing, because hockey players typically aren't good in figure skates, right?
Right.
So I thought that was really funny. And look, just one final point here before we move on to the final section here is that, to Mike and Christy's point, remember, the most important coach in your kid's life is you as a parent. You are the most important coach. So one thing, and Mike alluded to this, one thing you should ask yourself is, if you're telling the coach of your hockey team to discipline your kids, what's that say about you? That you're not willing to discipline your kids? Mike, what he's saying is right. No, you need to be that coach. That's your job. You chose to have the kids, right? Or they're your kids regardless, right? So, if you wouldn't be coaching your kids a certain way, think about that, right? If you have a coach that's shaming your kids, if you wouldn't do that, pull your kid out of that locker room or talk to that coach. It's not right. Right. Again, not trying to get parents to rise up against coaching staffs or anything like that, but you are the most important coach in your kid's life. Now, one thing I want to say here, Mike alluded to JB Spizzo, who was a guest we had on a few episodes ago. Make sure you listen to that episode. Phenomenal talk with him. But we talked about standards and setting standards. And one of my favorite parts of that episode is we had asked him, what are the 4 or 5 standards you see in every professional sports locker room? Because he does more than just ice hockey. And it wasn't assists or shooting or skating. It was character, community, the ability to be a good teammate, right? The ability to learn. It was all these things that we kind of go, oh yeah, that thing that we just kind of overlook.
Oh yeah.
Right. Just, oh yeah, your character's important, right? He's saying that at the NHL level, that's one of the top 5 characteristics of someone that's going to succeed. So it all comes back to standards, right? The standards we set for those words, and then a way for tracking those standards. Right. So one of the things with the unification object, coming back to the point, which I love this show because we're just like parents, we go all over the place, is you got to set clear standards for the object. And again, we both talked about this earlier. A good standard for the object is not the person who scored the most goals every game, right? A good standard is who displayed the best level of teamwork, or whose performance tonight, the effort was above and beyond, right? That's something that can now get spread apart, right, to every member of the team. And typically that's somebody different every game, right? The nice part about it is that the player that has it has to typically give it to somebody else. Usually it's not the coach that hands it out. It's the player that had it from the previous game, which keeps you from giving it to the same player twice, right? The team's usually pretty good about that. But set the standards that you want to set for your team. And this is something, this is how you earn it now, that can go back. You want to establish this very, very early in the season. All right. Now, I talked earlier about how I used the kettlebell at a training camp. At that same training camp, one of the things I was trying to do with this team, because we were doing a complete culture rebuild with this team. All right. This is a team that was not very good before my coaching staff came in. We wanted to make sure we did a complete culture change. And one of the things that we didn't think that was being done well was we didn't think that the team name and the team brand, if you will, was being respected well enough, right? That it was just, oh, I played for that team. I wasn't okay with that. The coaching staff wasn't okay with that. It wasn't, oh, I played for that team. It's like, no, I'm a member of this club. I'm a member of this organization. There was a team before me. There's going to be a team after me, and I'm a member of it right now. So one of the things we did to have them earn the right to be part of our team was we went to a ski slope, an outdoor ski slope place that, it was in the middle of the or late summer. So there's no snow, and there's just this massive hill. And one of the things that we did over the course of 3 days where we had them running up one hill, another hill, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Their last task as a team was they had to run up the biggest ski hill that they had, right? And what we told them before they did it, because they'd been training these little hills the whole week or the whole weekend, was at the top of this hill is your jersey, right? And if you want your jersey, you've got to get to the top of the hill, right? And we will all be up at the top of the hill with our jerseys at the end. Now, the funny part is they started going up the hill one by one. It was super motivational, super inspirational, and they were earning their jerseys. And what I remember about the story, this will make you both laugh, is it got down to me and about 2 other players. And I realized that after these 2 players left, I'd be the only one left. And I said, oh man, they're going to make me run up this mountain. And I hadn't really thought about it until that moment. So I started mentally preparing myself. And sure enough, the last person went up. And what would happen is when a player got to the top, they'd call down. So the last player went up, and then I heard the whole team, Lee, right? And I remember this. I'm like, all right, I'm mentally prepared. I got halfway up the hill, no problem. Then the next 25%, I was like, all right, I'm feeling this. That final 25%, you had to dig deep. It hurt. I'm not gonna lie to you. It hurt for me, and I'm in pretty good shape, right? But you earned it. You really earned your way to the top of this mountain, right? And when I got up there, the whole team was together. We all had our jersey, and then together, not one by one, together, we all had these little sleds. We went down the hill as a team, and we took a team picture. That changed the temperature of the team completely. Like, this was not a step over team suddenly. We just earned it. And this is why I said you start at the beginning of the season. We had this great weekend together. We had this great training camp or events. You can do this at any level, all right? Where throughout the entire season, we were able to reference when you put the jersey on or you had the kettlebell, we did this thing that no other team had done. How do you think that played out in the third period of a lot of games we were behind? When we got to the playoffs and the championship game, it was there. I remember them saying, we earned this. We earned this jersey. They didn't earn their jersey. We earned our jersey. We earned the ability to be here. Complete unification over a common experience that set them apart from the rest of the league. And they did win that year, right? Granted, we had a great team. We had great tactics. We had great athletic ability. But it all came back to that moment for them to come full circle. Yeah. Setting those up at any level, whether you win or not, right? This is how you define winning. Defining winning for that team was winning a championship. This might be defined as graduating high school. It might be defined as just having a 500 season. It's however you want it to be. Them going through that together was a very important moment of their lives and one that they'll never forget. And it all started at the training camp. So that's one long story, but it's a great example of how when you're part of something bigger than yourself, it takes on a meaning. I know they use that experience in their lives. I still get emails and calls and texts from those players about it. I get calls from players from 15 years ago that I coached that we did similar things when I was just a wee lad coaching at 22, right? The last quick one, the following year, one of the things we did was we gave every player an envelope. We said, you have to carry this envelope the whole training camp. And they did, right? And what was great is at the end of the training camp, they opened their envelope and every one of them had a puzzle piece. All right. And we made them put together the puzzle with all the pieces they had. And it was one of my favorite quotes. It was, fate or the storm whispers to the warrior, you cannot withstand the storm. And the warrior whispers, I am the storm. And the puzzle was that with our team logo on it. And we framed it and put it in the locker room. We're all a piece of the puzzle, and it doesn't work if we don't have all the pieces. Metaphor, it's still in the locker room actually to this day to remind other teams about it. There's so much creativity and things you can do to teach teamwork and teach the importance of it through metaphors, which I think often goes underestimated. All right. I've said this all the time. I'm going to toss it to you guys. It is easy to build a team bond. It is very, very easy. I said this. I can go into any room, people hating each other. It doesn't matter. I can get them working together pretty quickly. Maintaining it is hard. The next day when I'm not there and they go back to hating each other, right? Creating a team bond is easy. Maintaining it is hard. That's why these reminders of what we stand for are so important. You don't have to like everybody that you're with. You don't have to like all your teammates, but you have to respect them. You have to know you're going towards a common goal and trust that even if I don't like the person sitting next to me, and hopefully you do, that I know they're still working as hard as they can to win, right? There's a difference between that and them sabotaging the team. So anyway, sorry for going on so long there. I'm a big believer in that. Christy, I want to toss it to you because like you've been a member of teams your whole life. Being a television anchor is a team sport beyond belief. Obviously you've watched your kids do this. You've been in athletics yourself, in terms of just setting standards, earning it, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I love the idea of, especially in the beginning of the season when you're all just coming together for the first time. And again, the kids, come from different schools, different parts of town, not all know each other, and there may be some cliques already developed.
Right.
That team bonding is so important. And I love when the teams have done that. One year, my daughter's team had them do carry a bucket from a fall, Salmon River Falls. Now I remember they had to carry buckets of pucks all the way down from the top of the falls to the bottom of the falls. And they only could do that as a team. They really had to work together to do that. Also the ropes challenge,
right,
where you're, way up going across with ropes. You really have to learn how to trust each other, right, and rely yourself on each other.
And yourself.
Yeah. And yourself.
Right.
There are so many opportunities for teams and coaches to really let the kids understand that you are part of the team. I love the idea of the puzzle pieces. I think every coach should do that. Put a little puzzle in an envelope, and at the end of the day, have the kids all come together. Right. And it's such a great metaphor for puzzle the importance pieces, of
challenge coins.
Just a right. part of something bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
The challenge
really have to set the standards and right from the top, so everybody's on the same page right from the beginning of the season. Agree. And a lot of that goes to the team culture.
Yeah,
setting the tone.
The coach and the coaching staff establishing it.
Yeah.
Again, challenge coins are another one that I talk about. The puzzle pieces are like a challenge coin. Challenge coin being you give everybody on your team an object, a coin, something they can keep in their pocket. And we used to do this thing of if you don't have that on you, there was a fine or some sort of, funny punishment in the sense of that, obviously when you're on the ice, it's one thing, but if you show up to practice without your challenge coin in your pocket, you're team down. Right. So that was another one. You had to have that on you all the time. That's borrowed from the military, the challenge coin aspect, which is not exactly the same, but Mike, I want to turn it to you. Cause again, there's so many tactics. Christy, by the way, that was phenomenal. Everything you just said there. Absolutely. Start it early, set the standard early. The coaching staff should all do that, right? Even at the atom level, we set a standard of you're going to work hard. We're not here to babysit, right? We told that to the kids and the parents, right? And these are 5, 6, 7-year-old kids. Like we're not babysitters. We're here to coach. And we're going to be fair, but we're going to work the kids. That's the standard. Hard work and skate. That's the number one skill, obviously. Mike, turning to you, because I've clearly had a cup of coffee this morning. Talk to me about standards and establishing them early in the season and the unification objects.
Yeah, well, I love that. I love that whole training camp idea and the ability to get the whole team involved. I know, going back to JB again, he's probably a tired source, right, for motivation, but
he's never tired. So no,
not him. But I've stole a really great program from him last year with my team. So when he was with the Panthers, he had the guys. He did their training camp at West Point, and he had the colonel had separated the two teams. To two groups of guys into two teams. And he said, okay, here you have to grab, it's a 120-pound rock and boulder. And you had to find a way as a team to get that boulder up Torn Mountain. And he got to the top, and these guys are like, and JB had an interview with some of the guys who were on that team. They said to this day, I mean, you have multi-millionaires, that have played the NHL for years and years and years. Like, you want me to do what? Like, right. And they did it. And because it binded them together, and they said they never forget. To lead to your point, when they got up to the top of the mountain and they celebrated the success, that is where they gave the team captain jerseys out, and that's where they announced where the team was going to start. Now we did this with my team because my situation was our team got together from kids from all different communities, and we had to bind them really quickly, and it was the same idea: put them in a challenging situation, one that they could have success with, and they could work together. Now, our kids, I think, had a 30-pound rock, not a 120-pound rock.
Right. Right.
They're 13 years old. So, but I could tell you right now, they're remembering that now more than anything, more than practices, more than games, that ability to really work together as a team.
Right.
And I think that's really where, and then you could take that piece, and to your point with the puzzles and other unification objects, you could take that rock, or you could take that puzzle, or you could take that experience and then use that as a theme throughout the season with your kids to keep bringing them back to the sacrifice, the teamwork, the inclusion, all of those kind of things that we want to teach in our young athletes, that they can be successful. Team USA just did this, winning the
Right.
gold medal at the World Junior Championship. Having, they had this
Barrel. Yeah.
story about a person having to get through the desert, but the only way they could get through the desert is to take one barrel at a time. Like, I can't finish it, I can't get across the desert. No, once you see the barrel, you've known you got there. You just have, the next barrel's just down the road. You just have to get to the next barrel. And they carried this barrel with them throughout the whole tournament.
Right.
So and it was in their locker room. Nobody needed to know about it. It wasn't public. It was in the team. Nobody had to say anything about it until the end, when
they brought it on the ice with Canada on it. So they got a little trouble for that. But once
but because again, that's probably that understanding that the players knew that wasn't derogatory. The players knew it was an oil barrel, not a garbage can.
Right.
And if you look back at the history, it was every team they defeated, and it was their unification object. It was something they took more pride in taking pictures with that barrel than they did with the trophy. And I think it's like that. That's the story they'll remember. And you know what? Those players, when they are coaches, will use that story, and they'll use that motivation with their own kids. Right. And I think it's just, and again, does it help that you win? Yes. Nobody wants to hear about the unification story when you lose. Like, oh, that was a shitty, that was a crappy unification story. But this was a good one. And I think that was, I don't know. I love those things where you can have an early establish your goals, your expectations, your level of commitment, and then carry that through the season. I think that's the coolest thing you can do as a coach with your team.
Amen, brother.
There you go. I'll tell you this too, as we round this out, that, there's always been this question I get asked, like, well, can you teach someone to win? You can practice it. Can you practice winning? Yeah. Putting a boulder up on top of a mountain, running on top of a mountain, doing something together, overcoming adversity is something you can practice. And the more you practice it, the better you'll get at it. We are speaking a day after Tom Brady made it to his 10th Super Bowl. Okay. Now I'm not a big Tom Brady fan in terms of, like, I've never been rooting for any of his teams, but there's clearly some experience there. When you get to 10 Super Bowls, you must know what he's doing. Why is he so good 2 minutes in the game, 2 minutes left in the game? Because he's done it over and over and over and over again. Right. If you get to a big game with your team, or you're just trying to win a game with your team, it doesn't have to be a big game. If you've practiced overcoming adversity together, if you have standards set, if you have something in the locker room that you can earn for going the extra mile, that's a way to establish that and practice that. It is learned behavior. And Mike, to your point, only one team typically gets to win in any sport. It's very, very hard to win. It's one of the most underestimated hardships of life, is winning. If you look at any league, one team wins. There might be 32 teams. There might be 4,000 teams. One team wins. It's hard no matter how you look at it. So if 32 teams have a unification device and the 31 of them don't win, you're still learning how to follow that road towards winning, right? It's all cumulative experience, right? And I can tell you this right now, especially for the parents listening, because again, winning on the ice is one thing. It's great. I'm not going to lie to you. I love winning on the ice as a coach, as a player, as a parent. I love it all. But winning in life is so much more important, right? Being a conducive member of society, being a good husband or wife, being a good parent, mother, father, that's the real win. And anyone will tell you that worth their salt. Anyone, right? So the unification device, I'm making a big deal out of it, but that is just another method to teach these very, very, very important life lessons that are needed. Right. Keeping in mind too, just real quick, the unification device can be a person. The Flyers last year, Mike, you were telling the story, but it's another one. Oscar Lindblom of the Philadelphia Flyers got a very rare form of cancer. He became the team's unification person. They were playing for him. Every team, every season has a unique method, a unique story that makes them who they are, whether you're 0-10 or 10-0. Find that meaning behind your team. Find a way to cultivate that, bring it to the team. If you can get a tangible object to embody that, all the better, and use it. Hopefully, after listening to this episode, you realize that the pink flamingo in the locker room, or the barrel, or the kettlebell is not just something that was brought in. It has meaning behind it, and it teaches a lot of life lessons. And that's where we're going to leave it today. The importance of unification objects. Do either of you have anything to say before I close this out? Because once I start closing, I can't stop.
No, that was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's an individual thing. It doesn't have to be what every other team does, but you got to find what works for your team based on the personalities of the kids. You got to know your kids.
Right. Keep in mind too.
You got to know your kids, and I would add, just have fun with it. Right. I mean, it could be a disco vest. It could be a funny hat. It could be. The kids have to, maybe they get a special bag they carry their equipment in. There's all kinds of cool things you can do. But again, I think the biggest thing is be consistent. Have something behind it. Have it mean something, and then also make sure that you're, as the coach, you're monitoring, making sure you're trying to get everybody involved in being a part of that winning atmosphere.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you, because Christy and I are now going to wait with bated breath to see you in a disco vest. All right. I don't know what that is, but I want to see it. The whole audience wants to see it. We're going to hold you to that for next season.
And we'll give you a mirror ball trophy too.
Right. We're going to take this back to the 70s for you. It's going to be great. All right. So
I already have one. I don't even have to have a motivation behind it, but I'll make a reason to have it for sure.
Yeah. Ring my bell, buddy. All right, here we go. Look, so for Christy Casciano-Burns and Mike Benelli, first off, thank you so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Obviously, visit us, ourkidsplayhockey.com, or you can listen to this podcast literally wherever podcasts are listened to. It's not hard to find us. Or you can watch the episode on Facebook or YouTube, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Just search for that online. You'll find us. So once again, for Christy Casciano-Burns and Mike Benelli, I'm Lee Elias. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. And we will see you next week. Have a great one, everyone.
Staying alive.